there's been an awakening. Have you felt it? Between those who are subscribed and those who are unsubscribed. As the two struggle for balance, but there can only be one. Those who are subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. So don't listen to me. Listen to this guy, who is a lot scarier looking than I am. Maybe. I actually don't know that. And subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. The self-promo is coming early in the video. What can I say? Hey guys, and welcome back to Access Blockbusters, and welcome back to the Star Wars Re-Examined series, where I go through every single one of the Star Wars live-action films, starting from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and going all the way until Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and discuss my fresh, brand new, reinvigorated thoughts on all of the films. Like I say in all these videos, the purpose of this series is really to look at all the Star Wars films through a fresh lens, through a fresh perspective, because I haven't seen a lot of these films for a while now, not in their entirety. Obviously, I've seen clips, I've talked about canon, I know Star Wars basically front to back, at least the movies and most of the TV shows. But anyways, yeah, this series has just been so gratifying because there's so much baggage nowadays with Star Wars, with each and every one of these films. There's just something. Maybe except for Empire Strikes Back and a couple of the other original trilogy films. Like, there's just so much baggage attached to all of these films, whether it's toxic fandom or whether it's divisiveness or whether it's just a myriad of complaints and then love and the two sides fighting. And so I really just wanted to block all of that out, watch the films just for me. Just for me. I'm sharing my thoughts with you guys because that's what this channel is for. But really, the purpose of this is just so I can relive Star Wars the way that it hits me. And that's really what I've been able to do thus far, and I've been super happy with it. That being said, the sequel trilogy, obviously aside from Rogue One and Solo: A Star Wars Story, are the most recent Star Wars films and the most recent in the Skywalker saga. And these films have been divisive. Even The Force Awakens, which was the least divisive out of the three sequel trilogy films, I think is still at least a little bit divisive amongst fans. And we'll go into why and we'll go into what I think about the film. But again, I just want to preface this video, and I want to preface this entire sequel trilogy section of this reviewing and rewatching series by saying this. Everybody has a different experience with Star Wars. That's really what subjectivity of film is. It's, you can talk and debate all about the philosophy and objectivity of film and is beauty objective and things like that, and is film objective and is art objective and all that kind of stuff. Okay, fine, whatever. But even aside from all of that, what is different about each and every one of us is that every single one of us has had a different experience with Star Wars, and our Star Wars is unique to us. It is uniquely imprinted on us. Our upbringing with Star Wars, how we were raised, what we watched, how we perceived, it all comes together to give us a different perception of Star Wars. So these three videos, I'm going to assume, are going to have the most discussion and debate out of all of them, and the most division for sure. And that is okay. That is okay, because each and every one of us sees Star Wars a little bit differently. That being said, if you want to disagree in the comments, go for it. If you want to disagree with me, go for it. If you want to disagree with other people, go for it. But I just want to make it clear. Be respectful and understand that your interpretation of Star Wars is not everyone else's interpretation of Star Wars, and that is okay. There is no need to be insecure about it. Trust me, I've struggled with this, and I've come to a place where I just go, the way that I view Star Wars is the way that I'm going to view Star Wars. And everyone else's experience with Star Wars, that's fine. And I am positive we are going to get a lot more into this next video with Luke Skywalker, but for now, I just want to preface this video by saying that because I think it's going to be important moving forward. Anyways, with all that being said, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, please make sure to do so. Give this video a like. We are almost done reviewing all of these films, and then we are going to be doing all sorts of rankings, tier lists, video essays, and things like that to wrap up my rewatch of the Star Wars films in live action. And without further ado, let's get into The Force Awakens. So like I do with all these videos, we're going to start out with the context, basically my background with The Force Awakens. And like I've alluded to in previous videos, The Force Awakens came at a time, a pretty formative age for me. I was pretty young when I saw The Force Awakens, not super young that I didn't know anything like when I saw the prequels, but also not old enough to really have a grasp of anything. And with all that being said, for some people, The Force Awakens was a return to Star Wars some 30 years in the making, because obviously the prequel trilogy had come and gone, but the original trilogy was their childhood, and The Force Awakens was a return to Star Wars that they never thought they would see. For me, The Force Awakens was just more Star Wars. You have to understand that I grew up watching the prequel trilogy as a kid, and then I watched the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars went on for many years. So around maybe 2012, 2013, I stopped watching the Clone Wars, and there was no Star Wars, but by that point, The Force Awakens had been announced, and so we started getting trailers. So basically, and I guess this is a nice thing, maybe I take this for granted, I don't know, but I lived basically constantly with Star Wars. So The Force Awakens, while exciting that I got to see a Star Wars film in theaters, was also not this really groundbreaking, awe-inspiring sort of thing. It was just, yay, Star Wars is back in theaters, and that's really exciting for me. Although I did go to see the Star Wars The Clone Wars animated film in theaters, and I mean, I had a great time as a kid. I don't know about now. Maybe I'll rewatch it, maybe I won't. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you want to see that. But that's what The Force Awakens was, and, I like things, I didn't like things about The Force Awakens, but I mean, to me, when I was that young, it was Star Wars. Star Wars was back, And it's interesting because after each subsequent sequel trilogy film, obviously I was growing older, I was growing more into my taste, things I liked, things I didn't like about films. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that made me more critical, or maybe that made me more headstrong in things that I liked and didn't like. But The Force Awakens had always been a film that I liked. I think I knew that for sure. I watched it, I think, maybe 4 or 5 times in theaters, not necessarily because I really loved The Force Awakens, but just because it was a Star Wars film in theaters, and when me and my friends wanted to hang out, it was, let's go watch The Force Awakens again. And as the years went on, and as The Last Jedi literally divided Star Wars fandom in half, and as The Rise of Skywalker basically pleased nobody, The Force Awakens just kind of sat there in the background, just hanging out. J.J. Abrams' initial attempt at reviving Star Wars with Kathleen Kennedy and company. And so going into this rewatch, I thought, okay, well, I'm expecting to kind of like this film. However, there's something really interesting that happened when I rewatched the film this time. And it's something that actually another YouTuber named Christian Harloff, who does a lot of movie reviews and movie reactions and things like that, it's something he talked about in one of his videos, his Sith Council videos that he does. And he said that now, after having seen all the Star Wars sequel trilogy films in retrospect, watching The Force Awakens is harder now. Because you can watch The Force Awakens, but it's clear that there's a lot of setup in this film that doesn't go anywhere. And for me, I realized that as I was watching this film, at least for me, that I agreed with him. Because while I can say, before we get into the story and really, really dive into what this story is and all the characters and things like that, as I was watching this film, I realized that I was enjoying the movie, but in the back of my mind, every single time something happened, I go, well, does that really make sense now that she's a Palpatine? Or, I mean, Finn is Force sensitive, right? So all, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And, when Snoke shows up, I'm like, hey, well, okay, so he's a Palpatine clone or he's a Palpatine puppet or what's going on there? And I'm not going to lie, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to really look at this film in a vacuum because it is the first movie in a trilogy, but also, it's important to look at the film on its own merits, right? So it's me really trying to juggle those two things, like juggling the fact that it's a part of a trilogy, but also that it's its own film. And I'm going to do my best in the review, but I'm also going to let you know that both sides of the coin are affecting the way that I'm judging and reviewing this film. So with all that being said, let's start with the story. And the opening crawl says Luke Skywalker has vanished. Now, that's a very interesting premise for a new series of Star Wars film. I mean, it's taken place, 30 years later? And the idea that Luke Skywalker is missing, that sets up some intrigue here, right? Obviously, none of us knew when we first saw The Force Awakens that Luke Skywalker wouldn't show up until the last scene. But I think that the kind of intrigue, right, of where did Luke Skywalker go is a very interesting catapult into this new series. But right away, I have to tell you, and I remember this too, in 2015. Back in 2015, when everybody hated the prequels, it seemed like. I remember watching Star Wars Episode 7 and everyone saying, oh, we are back to Star Wars. And what I think that is now is as I watch the opening of The Force Awakens is that J.J. Abrams is trying so desperately to emulate A New Hope. He is trying so incredibly hard. And I think at the time in 2015, we were in this perfect place of where everyone just wanted to see Star Wars. And if you saw a desert planet and you saw, an unknown hero emerge with a blue lightsaber and things like that, and a Death Star, it was just enough to make you happy. And right away, seeing that giant ship emerge and come across the screen, and then also seeing the desert planet and the droid and the plans being put into the droid and all that kind of stuff, and this black cloaked Sith Lord kind of figure, it was like, yeah, I mean, this is Star Wars. But now that I look at it, I mean, it's the semblance of Star Wars, I guess. But I mean, as I watch the opening, there's nothing wrong about the opening. I mean, the conversation between Lor San Tekka, who is played by, I believe, Max von Sydow, and Oscar Isaac's Poe Dameron. I mean, it's great. BB-8 is really cute. It's a fun droid. And there's the premise of looking for Luke Skywalker. Like, okay, I'm on board. And then Kylo Ren shows up, and Kylo Ren is great. Like, stopping the laser bolt in the sky, that's really great. And then you meet Finn, the Stormtrooper defector, and that's a really interesting angle to take, which unfortunately this film and the rest of the films don't really do anything with. And the film just kind of moves. It moves at that pace, but again, in the back of my mind, I'm watching all this stuff and I'm going, well, it's trying really, really hard to be A New Hope. And I can tell. I really can tell. But again, nothing is incompetent here. It just is. It's just Star Wars, I guess. So then very quickly we meet our protagonist, Rey, and she's a scavenger, and she's, in the desert planet, and she's looking for adventure, and where have I seen this before? Okay, yeah. So you're going to hear me say this a lot in this review. Like I just said, this film is trying so hard so hard to remind us of A New Hope. Which is funny because we just got a film. And I know, obviously, this film came out over 30 years after Return of the Jedi, but still, in my mind anyways, having watched episode 6 just before episode 7, we just got a film that was trying to remind us of episode 4. To see another film do it even more, it's just kind of funny, honestly. And by the way, does anyone remember that Poe dies like 30 minutes into the film? Because that happens, and apparently they just wanted him to stay on board because it was Oscar Isaac, and Oscar Isaac is great, and so he comes back later on. But yeah, that's a little strange, I guess. And another thing I want to point out here, and it sounds like I'm just nitpicking, and we'll get to the thing that I really, really liked about this movie, which is coming in just a few minutes, but one of the other things that I noticed about this film is that this film is full of coincidences. Like, and again, this is going back to, well, now that I know episode 9, I can look back on it now. Like, how is Rey, Palpatine, and the Millennium Falcon, how do they happen to be on the same planet? How does Maz Kanata happen to have Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber? Like, these things... these are things that if you're enjoying the movie, which I was and which I am, you kind of just go along with it. But I mean, now watching it with knowing everything that I know, these are things that now bother me a lot more than they used to. So the First Order is looking for BB-8, and Rey and Finn make their escape, and they escape on the Millennium Falcon. And I have to say, this action scene with the Millennium Falcon is great. It's really good. It's high energy, it's fast paced. The action in Star Wars, the flying action has improved so much. Like, this is what I think Star Wars should look like in 2015 when the film came out. And that's a big thing, right? Because this film, at least visually, looks like a Star Wars film. And I can really appreciate that. The visuals, the planets, the lasers, and all that kind of stuff, the stormtroopers, like, it looks like Star Wars. And of course, John Williams' music, it's still there. It's still beautiful. Rey's theme, Kylo Ren's theme, they're great. The Resistance theme. So it has the shell, at least, the bare shell and foundation of a Star Wars film. But again, it's just reminding me of a film that's trying so hard to be a Star Wars film, if that makes sense. But after the Millennium Falcon chase, I think we get our first scene with Kylo Ren and Snoke. And Snoke was a really interesting character, although, I mean, obviously an Emperor-esque character, but a very interesting character nonetheless that, I was really excited to see explored more in Episode 8, which, I mean, well, we'll get there. But yeah, a lot of really interesting setup, like also setup that Rey is a really great pilot, which is, intriguing, I guess. Maybe it has something to do with her bloodline, maybe. But then, and this is really my favorite part of this movie, Han Solo and Chewbacca enter the Millennium Falcon. And I have to say, of all the things that The Force Awakens might have done poorly or well, Han Solo, the character, it nails. Because I just watched episodes 4, 5, and 6 right before watching episode 7, and this character is still Han Solo. And it has, I have to give credit where credit is due, right? I mean, obviously, Harrison Ford is a legendary actor, but it's pretty well known that he pretty much doesn't want anything to do with Star Wars at this point. And when he was doing promo for The Force Awakens, like, he was all grumpy and stuff, and like, why didn't they kill my character before and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, regardless of all of that, he's a professional, and he gave the role of Han Solo in 2015's Force Awakens his everything. And that accounts for so much, because Han Solo, I think more than almost anything else out of the original trilogy rewatch, is something that really, he's a character that really became one of my favorites. I love the personality, and to see Harrison Ford come back over 30 years later and just step right back into the role was so gratifying to see. I loved almost every scene that Han Solo was in this movie. When Han Solo and Chewbacca, and even Han Solo and Ben Solo and Han and Leia are talking, that is when this movie is working. And maybe that is a little frustrating, that we didn't get more of Han Solo with Leia and with Luke. I mean, I fully am willing to acknowledge the fact that we're jumping ahead a little bit to Last Jedi with Luke Skywalker, that, I mean, yeah, it's a bummer we didn't get a big scene with the three of them, right? That's not really going to hamper my enjoyment of this film in particular, or the next film, but it's still just overall in the back of my mind going, yeah, I mean, it is a bummer, because I just think that J.J. Abrams and the writers of this film and Harrison Ford, they nailed the return of Han Solo. So after that, they go and find Maz Kanata, and I mean, it's a cantina-esque kind of place, and Rey finds the lightsaber. I mean, again, in hindsight, this vision thing, it's weird. Like, why is Obi-Wan speaking to her? It's just all the Jedi, I guess. And we keep getting teased with the fact that Finn has the lightsaber, and he's wielding the lightsaber even though he has no idea how to use it, but then he is Force sensitive, so I don't know. There are a lot of things going on, I guess, here. A lot of things being set up, and I think that's a big theme of this movie, is that a lot of things are being set up that aren't being resolved. And I'll touch on this at the end, because I think that this is an important thing to talk about with The Force Awakens. And then Kylo Ren captures Rey, and Leia and Han meet up again with C-3PO and Chewbacca. I mean, that scene, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I've said it before. Every scene with Han in it and Leia, it just works. And now, Kylo Ren reveals himself to be Adam Driver, because, Adam Driver, who, by the way, is great in this movie. of course, is interrogating Rey, we get our first hints, or at least not our first hints, but our first major hint that she's Force sensitive. Now, this I don't have a problem with. This scene where she's resisting him, I think that works really well, because later on in this movie, or is it in The Last Jedi? I can't remember, where somewhere she says, I need a teacher because I have something within me, this Force, that I just don't know how to control. That's fine. I do have a problem later on with the film where she just Jedi mind tricks those stormtroopers, because how in the world do you know how to do that? But okay, I mean, at this point in the Star Wars trilogy, I mean, we don't know who she is, so I guess I'll buy it. Meanwhile, at the Resistance base, they are planning another Death Star run. Another. 3 out of the last 4 Star Wars films have had Death Star runs. That is crazy. And it's at this point in the film that I start to get a little tired, if that makes sense. I mean, also the fact that R2-D2 is just shut off, and it's randomly revealed at the end of this film that he has the rest of the map, and when does he decide that he wants to wake up again? How does that make any sense that he decides to wake up at that exact moment when Starkiller Base was blown up? I'm sure it's explained in some canon comic or canon novel or something, but again, I mean, within this film, it just doesn't make sense. And yeah, I mean, the final Death Star run against Starkiller Base, it's not a Death Star run, but it is a Death Star run. It's fun. I mean, it's really well shot. The action's really great, but it just feels like the same thing I've seen over and over again. However, I mean, the stuff with Ben Solo and his father, I think that scene still really resonates with me because, again, Harrison Ford as Han Solo and Adam Driver as Ben Solo / Kylo Ren, that dynamic works really well. And I think that the lightsaber fight with Finn, it's pretty clear that A, Kylo Ren is very badly injured because of Chewbacca, and B, Finn has no idea what he's doing. So Finn is able to get a couple licks in, but Kylo Ren eventually basically beats him up and knocks him unconscious and destroys him, basically. And then Rey comes in and fights him. And again, I mean, I am willing to buy that she's able to beat him because, she's tuned with the Force or whatever, and he's badly wounded. So, I mean, that part is something that I can buy. The lightsaber duel itself, I think, is fairly good. There aren't many emotional stakes behind it, though, but it's a fairly decent lightsaber fight. It feels more original trilogy-esque than prequel-esque, which I think is good. So I'm on board with it. And that's how the movie ends, basically. I mean, we know how the movie actually ends. R2-D2 wakes up, which is ridiculous. Like, why and how? And then Rey goes to Ahch-To, I believe, and finds Luke, and that is the literal cliffhanger ending of this movie. And that is when I realized, it was right at the end, when I thought to myself, this is a literal cliffhanger. I remember everyone making those jokes. That is when I realized what my big problem with The Force Awakens is. So let's transition now to how my thoughts compare from now to before the rewatch. And here's what I'll say. Star Wars The Force Awakens is a very competently made film. It is a very watchable film that has a beginning, middle, and end, has characters that have decent motivations and good relationships and good chemistry with each other, especially Han Solo, and especially the original trilogy characters. However, A, like I said, it is trying so incredibly hard to be A New Hope that it is just jarring in places. And B, this is the big problem for me with The Force Awakens and rewatching it. It is almost entirely set up. If you look at A New Hope, and not to just compare everything in Star Wars to A New Hope, but if you look at A New Hope, I mean, you have Luke Skywalker, and there's a lot of intrigue here. There are a lot of things we don't know about this character yet, like Darth Vader is his father. That's a huge deal. Leia is his sister. That's a huge deal. We don't really know a lot about Anakin Skywalker, his father. We just know his father was Force sensitive and a Jedi, and now Luke is training with Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi. But that's a complete character, at least for now, and that's a complete arc within A New Hope, and we learn more and more about Luke Skywalker as we go along. Everything about the character of Rey in this movie is set up for another film that ultimately pays it off in a different way, but then reverses back to another thing later on. It's almost like a rubber band just going back and forth, back and forth. But at the end of the day, even if you're going to set things up, you have to tie them off within your own film to a certain extent if you're going to leave some mysteries hanging. Like, you can't just say, where did you get this lightsaber? A good question for another time that never gets answered. And to me, that makes The Force Awakens, while an enjoyable watch, also a frustrating watch. And that makes me a little bit conflicted about The Force Awakens because, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed watching it for sure. There were definitely scenes in there that I really liked, but it's just really frustrating to look back on this film now that we know everything we know about the sequel trilogy. So at the end of the day, I like The Force Awakens. Can't say I love it, can't say I dislike it, but I can't say it's the film that I'm going to come back to every time I want to rewatch a Star Wars film. It's just not. And I think for that reason, it came out at the right time that it captured everyone's imaginations again about Star Wars, but looking back at it now, many years later, it just doesn't hold up in that same regard. So those are my thoughts on Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I know I talked on and on about The Force Awakens, but I wanted to get my thoughts out there. I want to tell you guys how I felt about The Force Awakens. And next time, guys, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Can't wait to watch that film again, give you my honest thoughts, and we can have hopefully a very respectful discourse in the comments down below. But until then, have you subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel? If you haven't, make sure to do so and give this video a like. Comment down below letting me know what you think about The Force Awakens, and if there are any other series or franchises that I should rewatch next. I mean, I'm really enjoying the Star Wars rewatch, but of course we're looking ahead to the horizon as well, so let me know about that in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for next time with The Last Jedi, and I will see you guys in the next one.